I'm Christie Sever, an author of a children's book series that appeals to both boys and girls from 4th to 8th grade. Joe and Izzy are the main characters in my books, and they have so many adventures all around the world during all sorts of interesting times. You see, they can time travel. Izzy is a young American Irish dancer. She's a fun girl, but just a little bit bossy. Her twin brother Joe loves soccer and aggravating Izzy. Does this sound like any brother and sister you might know? Today I want to share with you a little bit about my first book called Sound the Warning, where the twins find themselves time traveling to 18th century Ireland during the time of the culture-crushing penal laws. Can you imagine Izzy's horror when she realizes that the Irish dancing that she loves to do is forbidden then in Ireland? While in Ireland, the twins hide from soldiers, climb into a castle, and befriend a quirky and rebellious dance master whose job it is to keep the Irish culture alive, but who is being hunted by British soldiers. Can the twins put aside their differences in order to work cleverly and together to save the dance master's life? Even if they do, how will they ever be able to return home to their 21st century family and friends? Kids love the book for the adventures, but they are also sneakily learning a little bit of Irish culture and history in the process. I'd like to read a chapter of Sound the Warning to you. But before I do, I want to let you know where you can get this book for your own kids, grandkids, pet walker, or favorite school. 3 ways. 1, walk or drive your little self to the Anderson bookstores in Naperville or LaGrange, Illinois, or to the University of Notre Dame bookstore in South Bend. Purchase it off the shelf. Number 2, go to Amazon.com, type in Sound the Warning by Christie Sever in the search bar for both paperback and ebook versions. Number 3, you can go to my website, and the website is childrenoftheworldbooks.wordpress.com. On the website, you will also find a description of my second book that is set in 1970s South Africa during the time of apartheid. Book 3, set in 1942 Poland, is due out shortly. Now, on to the reading. As this chapter begins, Joe and Izzy have just been accidentally whisked away from their school through the magic of time travel. They have no idea what has just happened to them. Let's find out. They looked around them. They were sitting in the greenest world they had ever seen. They were surrounded by lush green grass spreading out to distant green clumps of trees. Everywhere the color was such an intense emerald green. Not like the grass and trees at home that sometimes had little smudges of yellow or brown in them. This was the vibrant green of a sunlit lily pad. The sky above was blue with puffy white clouds scudding across. The air felt soft and moist, somehow like all the harshness of the world had been worn out of it. "But where are we?" asked Izzy. "Where are Mrs. Sano and our school? Where are Burr Oaks Glen and our parents and our friends?" She looked so confused. "I mean, what just happened?" She stood up and turned around, looking in every direction. Nothing looked familiar. Joe stood up and looked around. There were green hills rolling all the way to the horizon. Riding along the green hills were long stone fences that came up to his waist. They were made out of stones that had been piled on top of each other. He saw little clumps of trees and fields that looked as though they were being farmed. Off in the distance was a collection of white sheep with plump behinds. His soccer instinct immediately kicked in, and he felt like he wanted to punt the sheep one by one over those stone fences. "Wow," said Joe, "I have no clue where we are. This sure doesn't look like Burr Oaks Glen." He frowned and thought, "Hey, I have an idea. My tablet is in my backpack. Let's just check the GPS and find out where we are." "Oh, good," said Izzy, and she moved near him and looked over his shoulder. He reached into his backpack, pulled out the iPad, and fired it up. They waited a few seconds. Frowned Joe. "It looks like the network is down or something. I can't get the internet to work at all." "Is the battery low?" asked Izzy, looking over his shoulder. "No," Joe answered, tapping some keys. "All the other apps are working just fine. I just can't get internet service. That's weird. I wonder what's..." He wasn't able to finish his sentence because just then something from behind him slammed him down to the ground. "Hey!" he shouted. But his face was pushed into the grass. He heard Izzy scream as she was forced to the ground as well. He felt strong arms, many of them, grappling with his own arms, pinning them. Someone was sitting on top of him. He couldn't move at all. "Get his gold!" someone behind him shouted. Izzy had been pushed to the ground as well, and she could see two girls who were holding her arms down. She looked over at Joe and saw two boys sitting on top of his back and a third boy circling around him, tugging at his backpack. She felt like they were being mugged. She needed to call for the police and let loose with one of her very loudest screecher-creature screams. The 5 robbing children stopped what they were doing and stared at her. "It's a banshee!" they yelped. They almost ran away, but one of the older muggers shook his head. "She might very well be a banshee, but she can't hurt us here. Let's just get the gold and be off." "You," the older boy glared at Izzy. "No more of your shenanigans. Be quiet or you'll be sorry. Now, where's your gold, you squirmy leprechaun?" One of the smaller boys pulled Joe's backpack out from under him and began rooting through the contents. He wasn't finding what he was looking for, so he turned the backpack upside down and shook it out. The other 2 boys, who were holding Joe down, looked over at the smaller boy. "Check those pockets with the strange metal tracks." The smaller boy tugged at the zipper pulls and reached around in the pockets, scattering everything on the ground. They examined the objects. There were books, a pencil case, a water bottle, Joe's lunch, some folders, and a hacky sack. There was no gold. "All right, you crafty leprechaun, where is it?" they demanded of Joe. "Where's your gold? And don't you be lying to us now. We caught you fair and square." Joe tried to answer the boy, but his mouth was smushed into the grass, and all that came out was a muffled oof, oof, oof. The smaller boy waved at Joe and said, "All right, lads, let him sit up, but keep your arms on his hands and legs so he doesn't scurry off on us." Joe sat up with the 2 bigger boys pinning down his arms and legs. He looked over to where Izzy was still being held down by the 2 girls. There were bits of grass stuck in her hair, and she looked totally bewildered. Then he took a longer look at the 5 children who had captured them. All 5 of them had pale skin with scatterings of freckles across their faces. The youngest girl was maybe 3 years old, and the oldest boy looked like he was about 14. The 2 girls wore long, heavy skirts that came down to the ground. They wore shawls about their shoulders and bonnets covering their long hair. The boys seemed to be dressed in very old-fashioned pants and jackets. Their shoes looked more like hiking boots than the gym shoes that Joe and his friends all wore. Sheep wandered around them, baaing softly and ripping up tufts of grass with their mouths. Joe felt like he was watching characters in a Disney movie. Was he dreaming? No, he thought. Someone's sharp elbow was poking him in the ribs. This was no dream. So, what do you think will happen next? To find out, just order my book. Sound the Warning by Christie Sever. Bye now.